Good morning, welcome to another GeoTechTalk. I'm actually debating whether to call this Geo Business Talk because I spend more time talking about business than I do technology, and frankly that's what we should be doing. We should really be focused on the business. But let's talk about Tesco Pete. Tesco Pete is a friend of mine. Tesco Pete has worked for Tesco's, one of the biggest retailers in the UK, for most of his career. He's had a very successful, I want to say 40-year career, maybe less, 30-year career at Tesco's. He is on the supply chain side of the Tesco's business at a very senior level. Now Tesco Pete uses spreadsheets as his go-to tool for everything he does within Tesco's supply chain. Spreadsheets. I had a conversation with Pete recently and we spoke about the industry that I work in, which is geospatial, with a background in GIS. I'm very careful to kind of differentiate. I'm not quite sure the associations are very clear, but they're definitely GIS is part of the bigger geospatial whole. I digress. Tesco Pete didn't really understand what we do. He didn't really understand the whole notion of geospatial. And when I told him his business supply chain is inherently geospatial, he looked puzzled. We spoke about maps. I brought up terminology like location intelligence and location analysis. The puzzlement in his mind and in his eyes was very, very clear. Pete fundamentally doesn't understand that he works in a geospatial business, and that's not Pete's fault. It's our challenge, is really what the focus of this conversation today is. How do we educate, bring into our world those that clearly work in the geospatial sectors? And I'm focusing very much in this talk on the private sector, which is the area within the geospatial world which has been the hardest nut to crack, that I've covered in other topics, in other talks. Public sector, we know about, and that's where we're established as a technology. But the private sector continues to be a challenge. I would argue that our approach, and this is nothing new, focusing on the technology as we've done, is the wrong approach. And we're all beginning to realize that that's quite true. So we have lots of people like myself who are trained in GIS and trained in geospatial who think, talk technically. We've got a new wave of people that have come into the business to try to change that. People that don't come from the geospatial, have a geospatial background, to help add that business mix to things. And that's good. I think that's a good place to be moving to. But I would argue the most important person for you to hire in your organization is someone that can get inside of Pete's head. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is we often hear in the commercial side of things, what's a low-hanging fruit? I had a conversation with a very large mapping company, not a GIS company, they're a mapping company. And they said to me, we know that supply chain is low-hanging fruit for us to go after. The banks and some of the other commercial sector organizations, less so, but supply chain, definite low-hanging fruit. And what they did, they actually employed somebody from the supply chain world, kind of like Pete a little bit. And I would argue the person they should have hired is someone that could get into Pete's head. Someone that could ask Pete, and I'm going to go to this word story. Someone that can get into Pete's head in a sector which is clearly geospatial, even though they don't realize it. Get into Pete's head and get Pete to tell them about some of the workflows that he currently goes through. Let me give you an example. Supply chain is the production and distribution of commodities. So I need to get something from a warehouse to a retailer quickly. There's a customer that needs it, this retailer. We send our truck out to deliver it to this particular retailer. The truck gets stuck in a snowstorm, cannot deliver on time. What is that story for Pete? How does Pete deal with that problem? My guess is, and I haven't had this conversation with Pete, that there would be phone calls made going through different people to let them know that the truck is stopped and we can't get there. Where do we find another distribution center that might have the same part? Da, 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 da. So a very long-winded, laborious, challenging process with Pete with his spreadsheet in the midst of all of that. Can you think as a geospatial person how you might tell that story differently. You don't have to talk the technology, but how can Pete solve that particular conundrum using a solution which is powered by geospatial technology? I'm not even going to answer the question. It's for you to answer that question. But the person who is most valuable to your organization is a person that can get inside of Pete's head, understand Pete's workflows. I didn't use the word problem because Pete doesn't necessarily even see that's a problem. Get inside of those workflows, get Pete to tell the current story, and then think, maybe even tell Pete in the gentlest of terms, in the easiest of understandable ways, how that story might be changed to make that more efficient. Thanks for watching. One for you to think about, I think, there, but I still argue the point that that person that can understand what's in Pete's head and tell a different story for Pete to understand is the most valuable person in your geospatial organization. You can subscribe to the channel just in the bottom corner here, and we'll have more of these type of talks coming up. Thanks for watching.